The Toronto Maple Leafs have been knocked out of the Stanley Cup playoffs by the Florida Panthers. Dave Morassutti of Locked On Leafs is here to discuss what this means, why it happened, and what is going to happen going forward in Toronto. Gil Martin here. The Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues as we welcome David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs to discuss his team's second round exit from the Stanley Cup playoffs and what it's going to mean going forward. And David, when you look back at the series, what is the biggest reason that the Leafs came up short?
I just think the Panthers found a way to play as a united team, right? And they did the small things right to pick up this win. And the Leafs, unfortunately, it was their core once again that failed them against a team that on paper is not as talented as them, but worked harder, did the things that they needed to do, and played with a lot of belief and confidence. And confidence is when you're in a playoff series, if you don't have confidence in what you're doing, you're not going to go very far.
And, you talked about the core, but is there one or two players who stick out the most that you feel just underperformed in this series?
Well, I mean, obviously Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews are the two that get it because, not only are they among the highest paid players on the team, but they're the ones who are supposed to lead the charge offensively. And neither of them really did that. Especially, Austin Matthews, he's the one that he's supposed to be the game breaker, the goal scorer. And he just did not provide that in this series, right? And then with Mitch Marner, he's the one that's supposed to help Austin Matthews get there as well in a way as the playmaker. Neither one really seemed to make those plays that the Leafs needed them to make, especially in game 5 where it's tied, it's overtime. The Leafs have all these chances. Austin Matthews, especially in overtime, he has a chance alone in front and he doesn't bury it. And you can see that as, the Leafs weren't getting those chances to go through, like their confidence was going down. And it just seemed like the writing was going to be on the wall. And when those guys are not at their best, when they're not being the game breakers, this Leafs team suffers the same fate as they always do, which is getting bounced from the playoffs in very frustrating fashion.
Did the Panthers do something to slow down those two players or the four core guys, or was it something that they weren't doing?
I think honestly part of it was the Leafs. When you looked at how they scored against the Panthers, it was simple, getting traffic in front, getting shots on net. I think the Panthers, what they did well in this game, their forecheck was really good. Their transition game was really good. I think, Matthews Marner got caught way too many times making the cute, maybe skilled play rather than the simple plays that they needed to make. And the Panthers made them pay for that. I think the physicality, too, got to the Leafs a little bit, especially early in the series. And I think that kind of wore them down. And yeah, I think that's what the Panthers did. They didn't give the Leafs much time and space, and it was a lot of one and done, right? What Matthews and Marner thrive on is their ability to hem their opponent in their own zone and get multiple chances. And there was too many one and dones for that group. They just really didn't get much sustained pressure. And that's because the Panthers, they made the adjustment to, if they're getting stuck in their own zone, flip the puck out. And that's the best way to kind of counteract whatever the Leafs were trying to throw at them.
Were there any bright spots for the Leafs in this series? I mean, I know 5 games, it's hard to find them, but did you see something that caught your eye?
I mean, Joseph Woll coming in for Ilya Samsonov, I think that the Leafs have been looking and searching for that goaltender to give them a shot in the arm a little bit. I think he did that. He did enough for that Leafs team to win when he was in net. I think, he was thrown into a very impossible situation, has little to no experience at the NHL level, and yet didn't look like it while he was, in this series. So I think that was a big positive. I think like Morgan Rielly continues to show that he's someone that of this core, he's someone you can rely on to try to at least put in the best effort. He scores a goal, he leads to a goal being scored in the final game. Should have probably had a second one depending on how you feel about the review. situation there. But I think Morgan Riley, for all the talk about how bad he was during the regular season, he flipped the script for me in the postseason. And that's what you want to see from a guy who is your top paid defenseman. He's got to be able to be a game breaker in many ways. So I think that was a positive. I think that, and then a final one for me, like, Matthew Nyes, for the time he was in this series, was pretty good. He shows that, he's ready for that NHL to be in the NHL going into next season. And it shows maybe where the Leafs need to focus some of their attention on a little bit more going forward.
Would you say losing in the second round renders the Leafs season a failure?
I think so. Like, especially the team they lost to. Like, if this was the Boston Bruins, yeah, maybe you have to think a little bit differently because Boston, better team through the regular season. But I just think for the Leafs, like, there was no better opportunity for them to go on a deep run than this year. You knock off Tampa. You don't have to play Boston in the next round, but then you lose to Florida, a team that really worse than the Tampa Bay Lightning on paper, and presented a really good challenge. And I just think that it was a different style of team, the team that outworked you. I just don't know how you can say that this wasn't a failure in any way.
And what kind of changes do you now expect this summer in response to this series loss?
It's going to be very tough, like with this team. It's easy to overreact, right? But at the same time, not reacting has been this problem for a long time, right? Like, at some point there needs to be a message sent that the standard hasn't been met. It's not acceptable. What's been going on, right? I look back to the Montreal series a few years ago where they had a 3-1 lead and they blow it and they bow out. And I thought that was the missed opportunity to send a message right there that it was like what they were doing wasn't good enough. But they put their faith in this core, in this group, and it hasn't led to anything. Nothing has really changed. It's been the same frustration over and over. So I can understand if the reaction is let's change everything. But in today's NHL, you can't change everything. There's only certain things you have control that you can change in an instant. You can't fire the players. You can definitely fire the people who put the pieces together. But you also have to be confident that in the moves you're making, that the next group that can come in will be able to do a better job, because it's not like somebody can come in and they have all the answers. And I don't think you can confidently say that it's going to be easy to fix everything that's this Leafs team needs to get fixed.
Well, should be a very interesting offseason to say the least. David, thank you so much. That does it for our Leafs review here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe to or follow Locked On Leafs for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and now on the SXM app as well. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.